Now we will move on to the next presentation. The title of the presentation is Revisiting the Conflict Trap, Assessing the Potential Resurgence of an Armed Struggle in Sri Lanka. The presenter, who is sitting left to me, is Dr. Sara De Silva. Dr. Silva is currently a senior lecturer at the Department of Strategic Studies, Faculty of Defense and Strategic Studies at KDU. She is currently teaching master's course in Security and Strategic Studies, as well as officer cadets and day scholars in Strategic Studies and International Relations. She is also supervising several PhD students on issues related to Sri Lankan national security. Awarded with a full fellowship to pursue her PhD program, she completed her doctoral thesis in terrorism studies at University of Wollongong, Australia. During her PhD candidature, she also served as a researcher at the Center for Transnational Crime Prevention Center, based in the Faculty of Law at the same university. Previously, she was an associate research fellow at the International Center for Political Violence and Terrorism Research at Rajaratnam School of International Studies at Nanyang Technological University, Singapore. Sarah, over to you.
Honorable Chair, Vice Chancellor, ladies and gentlemen. In light of my current research topic, which is revisiting the conflict trap, assessing the potential resurgence of an armed struggle in Sri Lanka, I wish to start my presentation by showing you this following slide and the photo of these three men, which might be familiar to many of you who are seated here today. In fact, they are the icon of the current security threat which Sri Lanka faces today. And my presentation will be focusing on whether Sri Lanka today is facing an imminent threat of a potential resurgence of terrorism in the near future. Now, before I move on to the actual case study on the Sri Lanka, I wish to first give an academic touch to my research. In fact, I want to share with you what is called the theory called the conflict trap theory. In this academic theory, it purports that normally when a country faces a conflict of any magnitude, whether it's small or big, once that country stops the conflict, once the conflict is ended, within the span of 5 to 10 years, there's usually a phenomenon that a conflict once again will start again. So this is extremely common because if you look at the global experiences from 1945 to 2009, of the 103 countries which have ever experienced a conflict of any magnitude, in fact, 59 countries have returned to conflict again and again, and it's almost a vicious cycle of violence and conflict. So why does this happen? There are many scholars which have purported their own reasons, their own hypotheses as to why conflicts keep on repeating again and again, even though it comes to an end at one point. And of course, the reasons are listed on the slides, as you can see. Now, Sri Lanka. Now, why Sri Lanka? Why conflict trap theory and why Sri Lanka? Sri Lanka is, in fact, at a critical juncture now, since today, 2014, marks the 5th year since the end of the humanitarian operations in 2009. So basically, Sri Lanka is at an extremely crucial, critical juncture where it is an opportunity, golden opportunity for us academia to examine the applicability of the conflict trap theory to Sri Lanka and to assess whether the potential resurgence of terrorism and violence in the country is an imminent threat. Now, as we know very well that even today, the revival of the LTTE remains the primary security concerns. And as the Defense Secretary, Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa, has clearly outlined in his speech recently that diaspora, the LTT, pro-LTT Tamil diasporas, they still continue to push for the struggle using three main strategies. First, to pressure for investigation on international war crimes, undermining the government efforts, and finally, and most dangerously, if I may add, that they are trying to push for our resumption of the conflict through reorganizing local elements. So in that light, in 2004 itself, in fact, we have seen so many incidents which made us think, which made us really believe that, in fact, the revival of the LTT will happen. It is an imminent threat. And I wish to introduce to you today, or share with you, the three main incidents which made us believe or make us threat that the revival of the LTT is in fact and reality that might happen anytime soon. The first is March 2004, the arrest of Nandagopan. He was in fact actually arrested in Iran. He was the second in command of the Nedivan faction, which was based in Norway. He was in charge of propaganda activities. He was arrested in Iran, and then he was brought to Sri Lanka, and now he's under the Sri Lankan custody of the Sri Lankan law enforcement agencies. In April 2004, there was a shootout at the jungle in Baunia in Nedunkerni, and this relates to the photo which I showed you at the beginning of this presentation. The three men, Gopi, Appan, and Thevian, this trio, they were allegedly receiving instructions from Nedivan in Norway and from Vinayagam in France to revive the struggle in the Sri Lankan soil. After the shootout, these three men, they were killed after a shootout with the security forces in the jungle. And after that, the TID had recovered a wide range of ammunitions which were in the possession of these three individuals. It is reported that the objective of these three men was, in fact, they had multitude of objectives. First, they were asked or instructed by Nedivan to recover the weapons which were hidden by the LTT within the Sri Lankan soil prior to the defeat in 2009. Even today, we know that LTT has hidden many weaponry around the island, and these three were ordered to recover the haul of weaponry. Then secondly, they were also asked to re-establish the domestic LTT intelligence network. They engaged in espionage activities in reconnaissance. And finally, they were also asked or instructed to recruit local Tamil youths to revive the movement and to join their movement. And it is reported that these trio, they had enough funding. They had bought safe houses, tractors. They had enough cash, which was allegedly sent from Europe, from the diaspora, and in order to revive the movement in the Sri Lankan soil. So this incident, in fact, was extremely significant for the Sri Lankan security forces because for two reasons. One is that this was the first ever direct clash or confrontation between the state and the militants since the post-May 2009 period. And secondly, this incident marked a strategic and a tactical victory for the defense establishment because they had successfully foiled and thwarted the potential resurgence of LTT activities and the potential resurgence of violence in Sri Lanka. Third is the arrest of LTT operatives in Malaysia, which we saw in May and July this year. Of the 7 operatives or activists which were arrested in Malaysia, it is said that some of them were official UNHCR refugees, and they were arrested on the premises that they have used Malaysian soil as the base of Elam propaganda and to generate funds, as well as use Malaysia as an overall launching pad to revive the conflict in Sri Lanka. So if we look at these 3 incidents, and based on the general patterns of the pro-LTT diaspora abroad since 2009, or even before that, we can see a clear pattern that these LTT diaspora, the international network, they're using 2-pronged strategy or an approach. First is that externally, outside of Sri Lankan soil, what they're doing is that they're trying to, of course, sustain the Elam ideology, and also they're trying to sustain the propaganda activities among the diaspora communities in their respective Western host countries. And they're definitely continuing their fundraising activities and all other operational and logistical recuperation to start the violence in the country again. And domestically, what the LTT diaspora is doing is that they are in fact responsible for directing, giving instructions, and assembling the foot soldiers, the cadres within Sri Lanka to revive the movement. Now, despite all of this, despite the untiring efforts of the diaspora, despite that they have the intention and the will to revive the conflict again in Sri Lanka, they have the operational capabilities with the funding, logistics, weapons, they have everything. But despite that, I stand and I maintain that at the moment, the potential relapse of terrorism, Elam terrorism in this country, is highly unlikely. And this can be attributed to two reasons. One is the lack of security environment. Now, we know very well that the Sri Lankan law enforcement agencies have continued to arrest and apprehend many LTT operatives abroad with the cooperation of other foreign intelligence agencies and police efforts. And within the country also, we know that in no question that there is an effective national intelligence network, and there is a sustained vigilance of the defense establishment to maintain national security as a priority of this country. And the second part, and which I believe is in fact the most important element, is that there is a disconnect between the ambition of the local LTT and, the ambition of the LTT rump abroad and between the general local Tamil population. If we can see the pattern, these LTT diaspora abroad will never come to Sri Lanka and take up arms. They can only, and they will only rely on the local people, the local Tamil population, to actually take up arms to do the fighting. They will never come and do it themselves, which means so far the diaspora has failed to mobilize the local population. And the diaspora is only providing the logistical support, but they have failed to gain the hearts and minds of the local Tamil population to actually take up arms and start fighting again. So therefore, the key for Sri Lanka to maintain its national security, and the key point for the future trajectory of Sri Lanka's potential revival of terrorism, is one, whether the diaspora will have the capability to mobilize the local Tamil population, and secondly, whether there will be an intent or the will of the local population, Tamil population, to once again take up arms to fight. So in this note, I wish to conclude that Sri Lanka will not fall into the conflict trap again because of the prevailing conditions that we see today. And the key is meaningful reconciliation, which will prevent the conflict trap, and the revival of LTT conflict, if it will ever happen in the future, will be more destructive and more violent. Thank you very much.